Are the Texas Longhorns overhyped? Are the Oklahoma Sooners underrated? Oh Lord, college football is back.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a Locked On crossover. Locked On Longhorns host Jonathan Davis, Locked On Sooners host John Williams. Today's episode of Locked On crossover, I should say, brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. On this crossover, you heard in the cold open, we got some questions to answer, right? Is Texas overhyped, right? John seems to think so. We'll get to that in a little bit. Is Oklahoma underrated, right? It's a lot of Oklahoma fans that feel like they're not getting the respect they deserve this offseason. And then we each look at the other team's schedule in the last segment. I look at Oklahoma's schedule, give my thoughts, and John will look at the Texas schedule and give his thoughts. All of that and more on this Locked On crossover brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My brother John, college football is back. It's been a long time since we did an episode together, probably since the last time that Texas and Oklahoma played. Of course, the last time Oklahoma got the best of Texas, 34-30 in the 2023 season. And of course, as we, get nearer and nearer to the season, we're getting excited. And my brother John started getting some tweets off, right? And, I follow him, so I started to see him. And a lot of these tweets had something to do with Texas, right? I'm like, what's going on? You know what I mean? So I had to get him on the show to talk about it. Before I give you the floor to explain why you think Texas may be overhyped, I'm going to read a few of your tweets live on the broadcast.
Tweets on Locked On.
All right, here we go. So this tweet says, which SEC fan base doesn't realize their team is about to have a disappointing 2024 football season? John Williams quoted it and said, Texas. Then this tweet says, what's your hottest college football take for the 2024 season? John Williams quoted it and said, Texas misses the college football playoff. Then this is another tweet. This is a response by John Williams. All offseason, I've wondered why Texas is getting the benefit of the doubt after losing 11 players to the National Football League when they've had one good season over the last decade. Of course, coming into the season, preseason AP poll, Texas is the number 4 team in the country. Pretty much everybody is picking Texas to make the college football playoff, and a lot of people have them in the SEC championship game. I'm assuming you disagree, and I'm giving you the floor now to explain why. John Williams, host of Locked On Sooners.
So let's start with this. I predicted Oklahoma to beat Texas last summertime when we met with the Locked On Big 12 preview show. I'll also say this: that was a bold take question. What's your hottest take on the college football season? Well, it's a hot take that Texas would miss the college football playoff. And I'm going to say this: I think Texas could end up with a similar record last year, and maybe not be as good of a team as they were last year. Now, we'll talk schedules in the third segment, but you can't lose 11 players to the NFL draft, including some of your better defensive players, in T'Vondre Sweat, in Jalen Ford, in Byron Murphy. You can't lose the skill position players in Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Jonathan Brooks, JT Sanders, and not experience some sort of a drop-off. Texas is going to be good. Don't get me wrong. The biggest issue I have is this assumption that Texas is just good to go, man. Like, the SEC is not going to be any issue for them. That transition is not going to be a problem. But for Oklahoma, my God, like, football as they know it is over. Might as well just focus all their resources on softball because they're the next Nebraska, right? What are we talking about here? This is an Oklahoma program that's had success for 100 years. This isn't a flash in the pan college football program like a Mizzou, who had one good season in Eli Drinkwitz's tenure. No, this is the Oklahoma Sooners. Did they have a 6-7 season 2 years ago? Absolutely. You cannot write that off. You can't discount that. Did they get beat 49-0 by Texas 2 years ago? Yeah, they did. It sucked. It was the worst college football watching I've ever experienced in my entire life. From the beat down to the offensive game plan, all of it terrible. I have a problem with this assumption that Texas is just going to go into the SEC and they're not going to have any kind of problem. And this is an Oklahoma team that beat Texas a year ago when it had 11 players on that roster that ended up getting drafted. And we'll talk schedules here in a little bit, but I have the same questions about a Michigan team. Now, when Texas goes up to Ann Arbor, a lot of that's going to be billed as Texas against the defending national champions. But that is the Michigan team that Texas is going to play in Ann Arbor isn't the defending national champion. That's a totally different Michigan team that they're going to face because they lost a lot of dudes to the NFL as well. So that's kind of where a lot of this comes from, is more just why are we not talking about Oklahoma and Texas in the same vein, in the same light? And I get that people have questions about Oklahoma, and they're deserved. Offensive line turnover, totally get it. First year starting quarterback, totally get it. Although I'm much higher on Jackson Arnold than a lot of people are, I totally get the reservations on Oklahoma. But why are we not having some of the similar reservations about Texas?
I'm going to answer that for you. I'm going to answer why people aren't having the similar reservations and why Texas, deservedly so, right, is, being talked about as one of the best teams in the country, right? So we talk about the most important position on the field, right? And that's quarterback Quinn Ewers, right? Experience. He comes into the season with 22 starts, right? That's very valuable in today's era of college football. If you look at it from 2022 to 2023, he made huge strides. He improved in completion percentage by 14 percentage points, right? Yards per attempt, yards per game, touchdown to interception ratio, quarterback rating by 31 points, and rushing touchdowns, right? He increased in all of those stats. So you would expect after another offseason going into year 3 that Quinn Ewers could take another step. Even if he doesn't, if we see 2023 Quinn Ewers, I still believe that's good enough to lead the Texas Longhorns to the college football playoffs. Then you look at the offensive line, right? That's going to matter in the SEC trench play, right? We returned 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line, a combined 109 starts on that offensive line right now, right? That's a lot. A possible Joe Moore award-winning unit. And guess what? All 109 of those starts came at the University of Texas, right? They didn't transfer in, right? They all came at the University of Texas. So that's continuity matters, right? When you look at the talent across the board on this football team, right? We just saw the SEC coaches poll come out, right? 10 Texas Longhorn players on either the first, second, or third team going into the season, right? So you talk about losing 11 players to the National Football League draft. This team is still loaded, right? It's just a quote. Doesn't mean a bunch. And he also said this before Christian Clark and Cedric Baxter got injured. But Steve Sarkisian said unequivocally, this is the most talented team he's had at the 40 acres, right? And he said that after we lost 11 players to the NFL draft. Now, I've never been the type to, talk about a recruit that we didn't get and say, oh, we didn't need him. I know that's like the Texas fan narrative, like, oh, we don't get a recruit.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah. We didn't need him. Somebody, decommits or somebody transfers. It's like, oh, he wasn't going to play anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I've never been that guy, right? And I'm not going to try to be the guy to sit here and act like losing 11 players to the NFL draft does not matter. But at least let me try to contextualize it a little bit, right? Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, those are huge losses. And I can understand why somebody would say, okay, Texas had the number 3 run defense in the league last year. I mean, in, college football, partially because you had 2 All-Americans at defensive tackle, right? I can't, sell to your listeners that Albert Collins and Vernon Broughton are going to step in and be Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So I understand if some people would say, okay, Texas probably won't have the number 3 run defense in the country. Those are big losses, and we'll see, what they look like on the defensive line without them. Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington. You lose your top 3 wide receivers, right? But you bring in Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, and Matthew Golden out of the portal. Will they be Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and Jordan Whittington? That remains to be seen. But you're expecting a boost from Quinn Ewers, right? And you already had, very talented receivers at the 40 acres. I think the wide receiver room will be okay, right? Like I said, you lost some dogs to the NFL in terms of that receiving group, but I think you did a good job of bringing in the talent in the portal, plus what you brought in via the recruiting classes. You lose your starting right tackle in Kristen Jones, but you have Cam Williams, who's 6'5", 350 pounds, and has been sitting 2 years at the 40 acres. I expect him to step in. Kristen Jones was a 4th round pick, maybe 5th round pick. I expect him to step in and give that same type of production. I don't think there'll be a bunch of drop off there. Keelan Robinson, he had 20 total touches on offense last year in 14 games. I love him to death. You know what I mean? We'll probably miss him the most on special teams, but that's not a huge loss. Right? 20 total touches in 14 games. That's not a huge loss, right? Jonathan Brooks, We talked about it, losing him at the running back position. Then you lose Cedric Baxter and Christian Clark. So it remains to be seen, how good of a running game Texas is going to have this year. Jaden Blue, we'll have to see how effective he can be touching the ball 250 plus times. But, last year he posted the fastest top speed in terms of miles per hour by a running back in the country. So, what we know is he's super fast, right? And he can be a weapon for this offense for sure. We'll just have to see how he does it, in a high level role. Jatavian Sanders, you lost him at the tight end position. You have 3 really good tight ends on the roster right now. None of them may be as good as Jatavian Sanders, but I think, their production along with Quinn Ewers' improvement, you should be good at tight end. Ryan Watts, by the end of the season, he was not in the rotation. Our top 3 corners were Terrence Brooks, Jade Barron, and Malik Muhammad. So, maybe he should have been because we got cooked in the Washington game, but he wasn't even in the rotation at the end of the year. And then you're replacing Jalen Ford with Anthony Hill, who I think is, one of the more underrated players in the country.
He's going to be great.
Will be a household name by the end of the year. Yeah. So we did lose 11 players to the NFL draft, but at least in my opinion, I think we reloaded. What do you think?
Well, I'll listen. Texas has recruited as well as anybody over the last few years. They have one of the higher blue chip ratios in the country. In the 247 Sports team talent rankings, they're right up there in the top 5 as well. Oklahoma's in the top 10. So it's a talented Texas team. It's just a matter of can the pieces come together.
Yeah, we'll definitely see about that. Quick word from our sponsors, and I tell John and his fan base why Oklahoma is not underrated, why there are real question marks and reservations about their ability to succeed in the SEC moving forward. As mentioned previously, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns and Locked On Sooners is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. And this amazing game is simulation. You get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Imagine being Brent Venables or Steve Sarkisian directly from your phone. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Longhorn and Locked On Sooners fans. Use the promo code Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so Oklahoma fans have had a generational run on social media this offseason, and a lot of them feel slighted, right? They feel as though, kind of like you said, Oklahoma is coming into the SEC, a blue blood program, always been successful. Took a little bit of a step back when Brent Venables, first came on, but you've seen steady improvement, right? And, why is there this narrative that Oklahoma is going to struggle in the SEC, but Texas is going to be fine, right? Why are people saying that Oklahoma could go 6-6 or 7-5 this year when that hasn't been the norm for a program like this, right? And I've seen a lot of Oklahoma fans say, this is a 10-win team, right? Like this is a 10-win team that's constantly being disrespected. Of course, we'll have to wait and see, what happens on the field. But I'm going to give my, shot. I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to give, my thoughts on why Oklahoma may be, or why a lot of people think that Oklahoma may struggle in their first season in the SEC, right? The first thing is, like I started with Quinn Ewers, you got to start with Jackson Arnold, right? Like I said, Quinn Ewers, the next start he makes for the Texas Longhorns will be his 23rd. The next start that Jackson Arnold makes for the Oklahoma Sooners will be his second, right? And we saw him in the Arizona game, and it was not great, right? When you look at it, sorry about that. I just dropped my phone. I got to, get my notes out right here. When you look at it, he turned the ball over 4 times in that game, completed 58% of his passes, and had a QBR of 58.6. Now, obviously, it was his first start, 5-star quarterback. But we've also heard, over the offseason, there's still been some turnover issues in practice. Now, it's practice. May not translate to the games, but it may translate, right? Every 5-star quarterback doesn't hit. We just saw, at Florida State, DJU, right? Who, was rated over CJ Stroud. And how crazy does that look now? Right. But, we'll have to see with Jackson Arnold. But there's at least a question mark.
It's a huge L for the Stars Matter people.
Yeah, exactly. But there's at least a question mark going into the season for the quarterback position at Oklahoma. And when you look at it, Oklahoma started the season last year going 6-0, but in that 6-game span, the only good win I thought was against Texas, right? Then after that, you go 4-3 with everything in front of you, right? Big 12 championship appearance, college football playoff appearance. You go 4-3 in your last 7 games with bad losses to Kansas and Oklahoma State. I want to say a bad loss, but a questionable loss to Arizona. It was Jackson Arnold's first start. And then a 2-point win against UCF at home, right? So you didn't end the season with a ton of momentum after going 6-0. You ended the season 4-3. Then there's the Jackson Arnold question. And then when you look at the offensive line, you lose your not only top 5, your top 6 offensive linemen to either the NFL or the transfer portal. So you're completely replacing that unit coming into the SEC. And then when you look at the talent across the roster, right, we're used to Oklahoma having household names on offense and defense. And maybe they have some on defense. But when you look at it, this may not mean nothing. This may not mean anything. It may mean something, right? On3's top 100 players, how many of them are from Oklahoma? 0. PFF's top 50 players going into the season, how many of them from Oklahoma? 0. ESPN's top 100 players, how many of them from Oklahoma? 3, right? So they gave y'all some love at ESPN. On3 and PFF, not so much. Then we look at strength of schedule. I'll talk about the schedule in the next segment, right? But obviously schedule is going to determine how successful the Oklahoma Sooners are. And Phil Steele has it ranked as the 18th toughest schedule in the country. Sports Illustrated has it ranked as the 11th toughest schedule in the country. CFB Network has it ranked as the 5th toughest schedule in the country. 24/7 Sports has it ranked as the 2nd toughest schedule in the country. And your 2023 opponents won 62% of their games, right? That's a lot, right? So all of that reasoning is potentially why people have question marks about the Oklahoma Sooners coming into the season and why they think that they might take a step back coming into the SEC. Your rebuttal.
Well, first, On3 hates Oklahoma. I don't know really what else to say about that. Everybody that commits to Oklahoma gets a downgrade in their rating for some reason. I don't know what it is, but there's not a lot of love over at On3. No, listen, there are not a lot of household names. Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, 2 all SEC defenders by the media and the coaches. That's about it. But you're looking at a guy like Nick Anderson, who had 10 touchdowns last year in a breakout season for the Sooners, 800 yards receiving. Deion Burks coming over from Purdue at wide receiver is going to be a household name this year because to me, he's a thicker Marquise Brown. He's got speed. He's got quickness. He can win down the field. He can win in the short area passing game. Listen, the strength of schedule is the reason why I think Oklahoma could be a better team, but maybe not win as many games as they did last year. The schedule is legit. You play 6 teams in the top 15 of the USLBM coaches poll in the AP top 25. I mean, it's not going to get any tougher. Oklahoma fans that are complaining about the schedule still, we just need to get over it. The schedule is the schedule. You wanted to go to the SEC. We're excited about the SEC move. Well, this is kind of what you get when you go in the SEC a little bit. And it's based on what you've done over the last 10 years as a football program. That's why your schedule is what it is. The offensive line, totally get the reservations there. Just a lot of trust in Bill Beatonbow. He's one of the best offensive line coaches in college football, has been for a really, really long time. A former Joe Moore award-winning offensive lineman. They did bring in a lot of transfers, but they've got 2 blue chip prospects that they've been developing over the last couple of years, ready to step into starting roles. Jacob Sexton at left guard, Jake Taylor at right tackle. Do we need to see them develop? Absolutely. Jake Taylor hasn't started a game. Jacob Sexton, he's started 3 games. You've got a Branson Hickman who started a bunch of games. It's going to take over as center. You've got a Fabechi Wiwu, who is a freshman All-American at right guard. And then you got Michael Tarkin, who's got a lot of experience, both in the SEC and in the Pac-12. So you're just hoping that it all kind of comes together. But yeah, there are reservations about the offensive line. I don't discount that one bit. We got to see it. I think it's going to be good. I think I'm optimistic about that. Jackson Arnold, the dude's just got so much skill and so much talent. He's got the right head on his shoulders. I mean, I look at the Arizona game and yeah, you cannot write off the 4 turnovers. They show up on the stat sheet. But if you watch those turnovers, I really only think of 2 of them as quote unquote bad turnovers. There's the fumble where, I mean, he gets hit pretty hard and he tries to get rid of the ball and he just doesn't have a chance to do that. There's an interception down the sideline where he was way late, like so late that would have been an interception in a Pee-wee football game. That's just how bad it was. But the other two, I mean, I thought they were just really good plays by the Arizona defense, either in a disguise or a dude just beat our receiver to the ball coming downhill. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. There are good players on the other side of the field that are going to make plays. And sometimes when you throw into tight windows, you're going to get picked off. And that's the little bit of the difference, and why I'm so excited and so optimistic about what Jackson Arnold brings to the table is that he's got a willingness to throw some of those tougher balls, throw those tight window balls that Dillon Gabriel wasn't able to or wasn't willing to. Jeff Lebby and Dillon Gabriel were so risk averse last year, and that's what hurt them in the Kansas game. Through 3 quarters in that Kansas game, Dillon Gabriel had like 11 passing attempts. Absolutely ludicrous. They were so unwilling to throw the ball in inclement weather that it really hindered their offense. Now they ran the ball great, but they like put half of their offense on the back shelf because they were afraid to throw in the rain. Against Oklahoma State, I mean, listen, I'm going to carry this one to the day I die. The referees botched that one. There was a blatant, obvious defensive pass interference on my man Drake Stoops in the back corner of the end zone.
I remember that play. Yeah, I agree.
It is just absolutely ridiculous. Now, did Oklahoma have a chance to go win the game at the end? Yeah, they did. Did they butcher that on 2 plays where, again, Jeff Lebby on 3rd and 10 calls a 3-yard slant and they only pick up 3 yards and then, or 5 yards. And then on 4th and 5, they run a 5-yard out. Like, miss me with that. Like, listen, Jeff Lebby did some great things, but I'm kind of glad he's gone because, again, so risk averse. So listen, I get the reservations about Oklahoma. I get that people aren't expecting them to have a standout season in the SEC. I get the schedule is tough. I just see the defense and I see what they're bringing back and I see what they're developing for much of the same reason that Texas fans are excited about what they've got along the defensive line, especially on the edges. That's what Oklahoma fans are excited about too. If they can get a little bit of health luck, if they can get some injury good luck throughout this season, they've got a couple guys, especially a guy like R. Mason Thomas, who has a chance to be a breakout star off the edge, a dude that just flashes every time he's out on the field, just hasn't been able to stay healthy in his first couple of years. So Oklahoma's got a lot of talent to work with. They just got to bring it together. I mean, if the offensive line is above average to good, this thing's going to be good. Because the beauty of where Oklahoma's at now versus where they were in the Lincoln Riley era or year 1 of Brent Venables is they've got a defense that can take a little bit of the pressure off of the offense. The offense isn't going to have to go score 40 points a game for Oklahoma to compete. And that's a far cry from where we've been for much of the last decade. So I think that's why so many Oklahoma fans feel optimistic about where this team's headed. Now, where it ends up, I mean, it's anybody's guess. We'll talk about the schedules here in a second, but I see a ceiling 10 wins. I see the floor for this team about 8 wins, but a lot of it is going to depend on how they go against those 6 teams that are in the top 15 that they're going to face this year.
Yeah. I just want to say, before we get to the money, y'all as Locked On Sooners fans are blessed. I just read a full page of reservations that I had about Oklahoma, and John responded to every single one off the top of his head with, immaculate detail, right? So Locked On Sooners, that's why he's one of the best in the business. Like he said, quick word from the sponsors, and then we get into each team's schedule. A lot of people saying Texas has a cupcake schedule going into the SEC. I'll get John's thoughts on that after the break. All right, this Locked On crossover also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Are you consistently tired after lunch? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing it. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore, like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, but go to 5hourenergy.com today. Once again, promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your first order. All right, John. So, like I said, looking at Texas' schedule, a lot of people think it's very, very favorable for the Longhorns going into year 1 in the SEC. And, I pride myself on being truthful on this podcast, and I have to agree, right? Texas certainly got a huge break on the schedule when you look at it compared to some other, SEC teams like Oklahoma's schedule or Florida's schedule this year, right? Texas is definitely not sweating bullets like, maybe some fans of those teams. So when you look at the Texas schedule, what are your thoughts on it, going into the
Yeah, I
season?
mean, I think it is favorable. And I think I appreciate your honesty and I appreciate your forthrightness there that you're willing to admit that. But here's the thing about schedules is you really don't know what it's going to look like until you get through the schedule, to be honest. Like Oklahoma's schedule right now looks tough. Texas's looks favorable, but who knows where these teams could turn out to be and what, a team like Mississippi State could end up being in year one under Jeff Lebby. I get Mississippi State has not been a good program. That's not a team that you're expecting to contend for an SEC title, but they have an offense that could make things interesting. Let's just say that Texas should win that game, no doubt, but they're going to have an offense that again should make some things interesting. And I know before we, scoff at the Blake Shapen thing, listen, he is an experienced quarterback that's capable of doing the simple things well. But I look at Texas's schedule, and I think it really comes down to 4 games. I think it comes down to the trip to Ann Arbor against Michigan. Again, not the same Michigan team that was last year. Yes, they're the defending national champions. That's not the same team. It obviously OU Texas is always going to be the game on the schedule. No matter what other games are on the schedule, OU Texas is going to be the one that gets everybody gassed up and fired up for it. And listen, I think that's going to be another classic this year. Then you've got Georgia, visiting Austin. That's going to be a phenomenal matchup with a phenomenal atmosphere, probably a college game day atmosphere. And then I think you got 2 more on this one. You got Florida coming to Austin, which, listen, I know Florida, we're scoffing at the Billy Napier era. It's not gone well for the Gators, but he's recruited fairly well, and they're going to be battle tested at that point. So going to Austin isn't going to be some like shock to them. They're going to have played in some really tough games to that point. And then obviously Texas A&M, the game that everybody's been itching to get back on the schedule for a decade, except for Aggie fans, that is, or Aggie administrators. So I think those are the games that are going to really determine what Texas's season looks like. And hey, they could go 4-1 in those games, 5-0. I mean, I think they'll probably go around 3-2, but I think, listen, the sky's the limits, but I think there's a great chance that Texas has a good season because of how they play in those games.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. Like, you really don't know until you see these teams on the field. I think Kentucky, is a team that you didn't mention that could be a lot better. A lot of Texas fans are penciling in a win there. That could be a very tough game. Exactly. Former 5-star. We'll see, right? If the magic can come out. But yeah, Texas A&M on the road, Arkansas on the road. You don't know, what really happens until you get into those type of environments. And then you mentioned Michigan. That's still one of the best defenses in the country. And then Oklahoma and Georgia. So when I look at the Oklahoma schedule, right, this vaunted schedule that I mentioned in the last segment, it's tough, right? I'm gonna just go game by game. Temple, I'm giving you all a win, of course, right? Hopefully, we don't have a Texas A&M Appalachian State situation there. Houston in week 2. I think that's going to be a win for Oklahoma. Tulane, definitely been a tough team over the last couple of years, but Oklahoma at home should take care of them. This is where it gets interesting. Number 15, Tennessee. I'm not as high on Tennessee as everybody else seems to be, especially when I talk about Jackson Arnold. I can't make the argument, even though, Nico Yamaleva didn't turn the ball over 4 times against Iowa. You know what I mean? He's still going into his second start as well, right? So, not as high on Tennessee, even at number 15. I'm giving Oklahoma a win there. So I got you all starting, off 4-0. Then at Auburn, I saw Zach the other day on Locked on Auburn said that the Oklahoma game will be Auburn's biggest win of the year. Do think that could be a tough game at Auburn, but I'm giving you all the win. So I got Oklahoma starting off 5-0, right? Texas, Red River, you don't even know what I have to put. Obviously a loss, right? So I have you losing in Red River 5-1, beating South Carolina, right? This is where it gets interesting. At Ole Miss, I just think that game is going to be too tough on the road. I think Ole Miss is going to be a juggernaut this year. Quarterback and coaching matchup right now, I would give to Ole Miss, and I think that determines the game. So I have that as an L. Maine as a win. At 11, Missouri, right? I know that outside of Texas, this is the game that all Sooner fans are chomping at the bit for. Same thing. You mentioned it last segment, or I think in the first segment. Missouri is getting a lot of credit for doing it one time. Can they do it 2 years in a row? So I have Oklahoma winning that game. Alabama comes to town. I have that as a loss. number 5 team in the country, and then at LSU, one of the toughest places to play, coaching and quarterback matchup. Right now, this may be my hot take. I'm taking Garrett Nussmeier over Jackson Arnold and Brian Kelly over Brent Venables. So I have the Oklahoma Sooners at 8-4. But some people would say that Tennessee game could be a loss for Oklahoma. Some people would say at Auburn could be a loss for Oklahoma. So, or Missouri could be a loss for Oklahoma. So I gave, the Sooners credit, like you said, it's a program that always figures it out, right? And we did see big strides last year from Brent Venables, but I could also see why some people would look at this schedule and say 7-5 or 6-6 would be reasonable because it's a gauntlet, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you probably hit the nail on the head there. There's going to be a game that they lose that they probably shouldn't, but I think there's going to be a game that they win that people don't expect them to win. I like Oklahoma in their home games, even against Tennessee and against Alabama. That road trip to Baton Rouge, I don't care who the quarterback is. You're going to Baton Rouge. You're probably playing at night. Weird things happen. It gets crazy. So I'm not super stoked about picking that one later in the season. I don't love it. And then, that trip to Oxford is going to be tough. I mean, Jackson Dart is a really, really good quarterback. I think he is one of the underrated Heisman picks. I don't think he's getting enough love. And then, Lane Kiffin's a really, really good coach. And I think they've made enough transfer additions on the defensive side of the ball that it's going to create a lot of problems for Oklahoma's offense. The Auburn game, it's going to be one of those weird ones because you're going into a big time road environment for the Sooners, but what's Auburn going to be this year? I mean, this is a team that lost to New Mexico State last year. So are we so sure that Auburn is so much improved that that's going to make up the talent difference and that the environment's going to make up the talent difference between Oklahoma and Auburn? I'm not so sure. So I feel comfortable in that one. And then, the Red River Showdown, I mean, that's a coin flip. It doesn't matter if it's the Kyler Murray, Texas or Oklahoma Sooners that are one of the best teams with the best offenses in the nation, or if it's last year when it was Texas and Quinn Ewers that were one of the better teams in the nation. Like, that game is going to come down to, a few possessions here and there, and you throw everything else out the window because it's just going to be a great game regardless. And I think that's what makes it the best rivalry game in college football.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you look at it, whether Texas is overhyped or properly hyped, whether Oklahoma is underrated or properly rated, I think Sooner fans and Texas fans have a ton of reasons to be excited this season. And, John and John, I think we make a great team, even though we're on opposite sides of the Red River. And I look forward to, doing this crossover again in about 6 weeks when it really matters, leading up to that game in the Cotton Bowl. Thank you all for tuning in to another Locked On crossover. Jonathan Davis from Locked On Longhorns, John Williams from Locked On Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.